All right, I'd like to welcome to the show Mark Pearson. Mark made his debut in 2005 and went on to have one of the most decorated international careers in Canadian hockey history. Mark played club hockey overseas and in the domestic league in Canada. He appeared in 284 international matches, including 3 Olympic Games and 2 Hockey World Cups. Mark, welcome and congrats on an amazing career. Thanks for sitting down.
Thanks, Cap. Excited to be here.
I wanted to first ask you, like, right off the hop about opportunity. And I think one thing that jumps to mind whenever I talk to especially super long tenured athletes is like kind of that initial opportunity that they get that sort of sets them on the course. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, players just need a good look or a moment to show and make a team, but for you making your debut in 2005, can you talk about like the landscape that was then and how you kind of got your first opportunity and then maybe your second and how it kind of all shaped up for you?
Yeah, well, thanks, Kev. Great question. I guess a little backstory on me. I'm born and raised Vancouverite, born in North Van. I guess I had a short spurt in Victoria where I initially picked up a field hockey stick in the Peninsula Field Hockey program there from, I guess, the ages of like 7 to 10. And then we moved back to the mainland and spent most of my high school formative years in the beautiful city of Tsawwassen there by the ferry terminal. And that's really where I began to hone my field hockey skills with the Tsawwassen Falcons program. So yeah, it was, I'd say, relatively traditional West Coast upbringing. I was a big Vancouver Canucks fan. Probably my first loves were soccer and ice hockey. And I played sort of field hockey in the spring. My parents are immigrants to this country. And I guess when you grow up in Vancouver or on the West Coast, you have sort of hockey and soccer in the fall, and then in the springtime it's baseball or field hockey. And my parents didn't really know much about baseball, but had played field hockey a bit growing up, so it was sort of natural for me to pick up a field hockey stick. And again, I had aspirations of, I don't know, making it to the Whitecaps or playing in the Premier League with soccer initially. But I think sort of the big turning point for me was actually making a U16 provincial team when I was probably 14. And traveled to the beautiful city of Brandon, Manitoba to represent my country at a U16 national championships. We played against Ontario, Saskatoon, Alberta, and it was just an awesome opportunity. The first time I'd sort of represented a team bigger than, my local club or community, and just really kind of got the ball rolling and started to dream about what could be in the sport of field hockey. And from there, it was, getting invited out to the junior national team for the first time and exposing myself to that group. Shout out to Giles Wheatley, who was an amazing sort of first coach for me on that junior program, and Gene Muller. And then Gene was sort of helping out with the junior program at that time, and I guess saw a little bit of potential in me and invited me out to train with the senior team at a pretty young age. When I reflect back, I think I was sort of 17, definitely hadn't left high school yet. And then from there was, it was probably a year and a half of training with the national team before I was selected to play in my first cap game against Scotland out at UBC. And it was pretty exciting getting your first cap on home soil. My granddad is Scottish. So yeah, it was a neat little family connection and just nice to sit up in the red and white for the first time on home soil. I literally nearly scored 7 seconds. Ravi Kalan made an exceptional pass and I was diving. It was probably the worst miss of my career. I don't know how I missed it to this day. But yeah, I nearly scored about 7 seconds into my first cap, but yeah, at least it wasn't, again, too much of an indication of what was to come, but missing an absolute sitter at the far post. But no, it's just, I guess, a pretty traditional upbringing. And I think I really, as I reflect back, that first trip to Brandon, Manitoba with the BC team was really sort of a turning point for me to say, hey, let's consider field hockey. Let's dedicate a little bit more time to this sport than some of the others, as I probably wouldn't have made it to play in the Premier League.
Yeah, well, and then, I guess after you make your start, there's always that kind of like initial starting period where you make some tours and you don't make others. For you you were still a teenager at that point, were you starting to see like, okay, if I can make some tours, like I got a real shot to be on this team? And then obviously as 07 and 08 rolled around, you were established on the team. But like those first couple of years, what's it like being in and out of tours and not sure if you're going to make it or not?
Well, I mean, I'm sure all my teammates will say I was probably a bit of a hotshot. I was maybe a bit too big for my britches back then and thought I was probably better than I was, kid from a small town of Tsawwassen. And again, I think I needed to be knocked down a few pegs. And I remember I did not make a tour in 2006. The boys traveled to Europe. And so I'd made a couple of trips initially I was fortunate enough to go to the Commonwealth Games. For me, the sky was the limit. And then I had a couple of sort of, I guess, early setbacks, and obviously not making a tour, which is totally part of playing on the national team. It is what it is. But suddenly when you open the email and your name is on that list, it's a gut punch. It's a tough feeling, and sort of, I think, caused me to reassess and say, okay, hold on a second here. I definitely need to work a little bit harder to get back and to be where I thought I belonged at that time. Obviously, the coaches thought otherwise, which is totally fair. And then shortly thereafter, I actually had a really serious hand injury. I got caught. I was playing field hockey at a UBC. I was playing in the league. It was actually the league final, I think, and I got caught. A stick swung through, actually hit my pinky finger. My pinky finger's not straight to this day, and it required actually 2 surgeries and almost 10 months of rehab to get back from an innocuous finger injury. So
Right.
That was that initial disappointment of being there, then not being there, and then actually sitting on the sidelines for 10 months with a little with a cast on, and going through quite an extensive rehabilitation process, really, I think, caused me to reassess and sort of rededicate myself and work on the things that I needed to work on to become sort of a more integral part of this national team. And I've told a few guys this story, but I remember showing up at my first junior team session, and I actually had no idea how to hit a backhand. Like, I'd never done it before. I grew up playing on grass. No one had showed me. It was like, that's a new skill. That's probably how long I'd played for. And I remember being so embarrassed, and because I literally had no idea what to do. And I kind of went back, and I remember with Jesse Watson playing West Van and club hockey, U18, U16 together. And we sort of dedicated ourselves to teach ourselves how to hit the backhand, because none of us knew what we were doing. And again, it's become a formidable element to my game. And I think maybe just being embarrassed the first time caused me to go back and really hone my skills. So just a few old stories from back in the day there.
Yeah. It's funny when I like speak to athletes, especially ones that have played for a long time, I think about opportunity, and I also think about like role models and who sets an example. So in those early years, I just want to ask you about role models. A lot of the same names come up for a lot of people, but for you, coming from a small town and then playing on the national team as a teenager in your early 20s, who were some guys that you really looked up to that I guess perhaps paved the way? You're someone who now people look up to who are younger. At that moment, though, once upon a time, you were the kid looking up to older players on the team, more senior players. So for you, who are some guys that paved the way?
So, I mean, first and foremost, and a lot of guys are going to say this around my age, but it has to be Rob Short in particular. I mean, him and his brother Pete, they were both on the national team when I was sort of trying to crack it, and they were both from Tsawwassen. So it was awesome for me to have those sort of local legends, local heroes to kind of look up to. And obviously, Rob at that time was playing and lighting up, the best league in the world in the hoof class, and was really a star. And I'll never forget, when he used to come back home from those hoof class seasons and train with Canada, he'd be staying at home at Tsawwassen, and I was staying at my parents' place still. And we'd take his parents' old VW Westie out to training and back at a UBC. And it was just, I mean, we used to stop at McDonald's on the way back and get chicken nuggets and McFlurries. Maybe I shouldn't be telling that, but just such an awesome experience, and awesome for me to spend time with someone who was so experienced. And again, right to the end of his career, he was just such a role model, him just like Ken was as well, of the physiological piece and, keeping up with the fitness and things like that. So, that was something that I've never been someone that's sort of naturally gifted physiologically. Like, I've had a little bit of speed, but I'm not someone that's, traditionally at the front of the pack when it comes to all the running. So I know it just inspired me to make sure that I did do what I needed to do in terms of the extra fitness elements to make sure that I was fit enough to play in the international hockey. But yeah, Rob and Pete, his brother, Pete was awesome too. And again, just two guys from, my little town of Tsawwassen that were sort of big impact on me. And then because Falcons did not have a premier men's team, I, played my sort of club hockey as I got older with West Vancouver. A couple of names that stand out as I think back were Steve Davis and Paul Wetlaufer. They were, awesome guys. Steve dabbled on the national team a little bit. Paul played on the national team for a long time, but just, really stand-up guys, worked hard, always up for a laugh, and just, again, helped to bring me into the West Van Millionaires Premier team, at a young age. And again, maybe yell at me sometimes if I didn't trap the ball, but that's fine. And again, they were just awesome guys, and some, a couple people that stand out as I look back.
Yeah, no doubt. And just like Rob, and you mentioned him playing in European hockey leagues and the best leagues in the world, you went on to play, in Germany, Belgium. I'm just curious for you, more than just the experience itself, but like, what were you able to learn in those high performance environments playing hockey in Europe that you could then bring back to the national team, once you were an established like national team player?
It's just honestly, Kev, it's the best thing you can do for your career as a player from Canada to like take that next step in your career. Like Canada's an awesome breeding ground. There's so many amazing sort of mentors locally, especially in the league. Like I mentioned, the likes of Steve Davis and Wettlaufer and the Short brothers, and the list really goes on. And those guys were amazing for me to learn from and to get me to a certain point. And again, the national team environment is awesome. That centralized sort of the amount of touch points that we have with the national team staff, the amount of time on task we have as a group, the bonds we build, the rainy trainings in Vancouver in November and December, they really sort of forge who we are as a player and as a team. But like for you to get to that next level, and I think as I reflect back, the timing was right. It was off the back of the 2008 Olympics. And I think Scott and I recognized that we needed a new challenge. Like we'd kind of done what we needed to do in Vancouver, and we were sort of, part of a team that was really dominating the league at that time, and then said, okay, what's next? And again, as I mentioned earlier, I was probably someone that was a little too big for my britches and probably thought I was better than I was. And then going over to Germany, and then you see all these guys that you're training with, and these are just, we had an amazing team. We had a lot of German World Cup winners and Olympic champions, but we also had just club guys that were amazing. So it was just like that super competitive daily training environment, and just playing against guys that are, again, you're equal, if not better, or they were much better at that time. And again, just causes you to sort of raise your game, because suddenly you're worried you're not going to make the selection for the weekend in the league games in Germany. So I think 2 years of that sort of professional daily training environment and training day in, day out with super high quality players was just kind of the best thing, and exactly what I needed at that time to kind of progress my career a little bit more and to challenge myself and to become a better player.
Yeah, and when you're able to come back and get in the environment with the Canadian players, what were you and Scott, when you played together in Europe, and for you, when you came back, what were you able to sort of like bring back and share with the group that may not have had that European hockey experience?
I don't think it's like bringing anything back necessarily. It's just improving yourself as an individual and as a player, and like, broadening your horizons. Obviously, there's sort of a tactical element, and what the German tactics were, and you can bring that sort of knowledge
Sure.
into the Canadian team, and it sort of expands your horizons in terms of the types of ways that you can play hockey and the tactical ways you can play hockey. But in terms of like what it brought back, like I see it as a way to sort of refine your skills, become a better and more well-rounded person, get out of the little bubble of field hockey and Tawasin, and just really grow as a person and mature as an individual. So I think again, it's more about just growing as an individual, I think, and becoming, a better teammate, a better person, and someone that's, again, has maybe a bit of a more worldly perspective on things.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question that kind of bookends a little bit of your career here. So we're jumping around a bit, but
Yeah.
you mentioned the '08 Olympic Games already. That's like your first sort of major games. You played in the Com Games before that, but '08 would be your first Olympics, and then on the far end of the other spectrum, the 2021 Olympic Games. I want to ask if you're able to try to compare them, and not just compare the games, but more of like compare where you're at in your like career, and compare your experience of like going to the '08 Olympics all wide-eyed, and then going to the 2021 Olympics as a more of a veteran
Yeah,
presence.
I mean, that's probably the right word, was wide-eyed. I mean, I remember I was I wasn't immature, but I was just young, right? I was 20, I think, or almost 21. And again, it was the Olympic Games. It was China at that time. It was the biggest deal on earth. And again, the sort of the size of the moment and the stars that were there, it was something that I'll never forget. And again, I remember going in, and everyone, our staff and players, it's like, don't get distracted, don't get distracted, don't get distracted. That was the big mantra. And I'm someone that, again, I'm not saying I like to get distracted, but I'm someone that doesn't mind smelling the leaves or the flowers along the journey. And I remember being hyper scared to do anything that appeared like I might have been getting distracted. And when there was, famous tennis players or Yao Ming or, the NBA basketball stars that were there, and I'm not saying that you want to stop and take a selfie with everyone, but I was making sure I wasn't going to be seen taking any selfies, I'll tell you that. And again, it was an amazing experience and one I look back fondly upon. But as I reflect on it, I just wasn't sort of comfortable in my own skin enough to really, and in the team environment to really know how to act in that sort of pressure, and just the size of that moment and what it was at that time, and being in a village like that. Just, yeah, again, for the first time, like, Common Games are awesome, but the Olympics are on an entirely another level. So again, it was much like many of our major games on field. There were highs and lows, but broadly disappointing. And I know we all left unsatisfied and wish we could have had better results. And again, it just sort of inspired me to try and figure out how we could get back there to. And I honestly, as I reflect back, I didn't realize how hard it is to qualify. Like, I wasn't, because of that hand injury I mentioned, I wasn't there when the boys qualified down in Rio de Janeiro.
Right.
And again, I, as a youngster, realized, oh, this is great. I get to go to the Olympics again in 4 years. And then, as I asserted myself more and became a more integral part of the team, just recognized how freaking hard it is for us as a Canadian men's team, or Canadian women's team for that matter, to qualify for a major tournament. Like, we were just punching above our weight to get there. And again, missing out on London, sort of, that really was the moment where I was like, okay, we really need to pull our socks up and actually rededicate ourselves to get back to where we want to get to. Because again, I naively thought in 2008 that, we'll just get another one in 4 years and we'll be able to do better.
Yeah. Yeah. How different it is, when you got to Tokyo, and obviously between the COVID restrictions and everything there, it's your third one. You went to Rio and then again Tokyo. So bookending the career, I suppose. If you look at the Tokyo experience, what was your mindset going in? Surely it wasn't as wide-eyed and as, I can't get distracted. What are you thinking more?
No, totally. I mean, obviously there was a whole nother set of circumstances, and that was, okay, we got to be careful here, because a positive COVID test could end your tournament, could end your roommate's tournament. So we had to be a bit more thoughtful around what we were doing and how we were behaving and how we were reacting and acting. I think the fact that we had gone to Europe a couple of times in the spring made us more comfortable with sort of the COVID protocols and how you could travel in the midst of a pandemic, and that it is possible, and you just have to be, thoughtful and around what you do and where you go and things like that. So I think that gave us a little bit more comfort. From a hockey perspective, I'll be brutally honest, I wasn't playing very well leading into it. I'd come off an Achilles tendon tear, which is a pretty devastating injury for someone who's in their 30s. And so again, it was an awful lot of work to get back from a rehab perspective. And I know we've talked about that before, but again, I was, not quite as fit, not quite as fast as I probably, well, I never was that fit or that fast, but I'd lost it a little bit. And again, I was just, to be honest, I was nervous of how I was going to play. And like, it's hard as a player when you're not that confident in your own abilities, let alone trying to be the best leader you can amongst the group. So I was honestly, as I went into that, trying to focus on what I could control and just getting myself to a position where I thought I could, be a positive impact to the team. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but I just, by the standards that I'd set prior to my injury, I was, not quite there. And I guess, again, broadly, team perspective, macro level, again, disappointing results for sure on every level. And we did not achieve what we wanted to achieve. And again, obviously proud of the fact that we were able to get there and to compete safely, and thankful to all the staff that helped us to enable that. But I must admit that I reflect back and was happy from a personal perspective, and that it was a good way for me personally, just a way to end my career, given that I was able to perform and felt like I was able to get back to a level that was, of international caliber. So yeah, that's how I reflect back.
Yeah, I mean, just goes to show how different, like, every games really is, every experience.
Totally.
If you look back on a 16-year career, a lot of things feel the same, tours and everything like that, but really they're different experiences. And we said, like, we said in the intro, triple Olympian, 2 times World Cup, the list of on-field accomplishments is so long. I wanted to ask you, reflecting back, is there any on or off field like memories, or, I'm sure, like we've talked about with other retirees, like this is the part of the conversation that could go on for 7 hours, but anything that just jumps to mind, between say 05 and 2021 that just jumps off the page when you like reflect back on your career, and be it on or off field?
Well, I think the big turning point, and I mentioned to you, the disappointment of 2012 and how that was, a gut punch in many ways. And I think, forced me to realize how difficult it is to get there. It doesn't just happen, right? Not to say we weren't working hard, but it requires so much work to get to that top level and to qualify for those major games. And I think the turning point of everything was, because again, there would be some significant retirements off the back of that disappointment for London, and a tough 2013 with sort of a bunch of new blood in the team, and guys like myself and Scott and others sort of asserting themselves more into the group as leaders. And I think the tournament that I probably look back on, obviously there's the shootout wins, that are so numerous, which are amazing, but the tournament in Kuantan, Malaysia in 2014, the Champions Challenge. And for context, we've had been notoriously terrible at the Champions Challenge. I think we finished last at every single Champions Challenge I've ever been to. I don't know how we kept making it into Champions Challenge. I just assumed they would stop inviting us, but they didn't. But we had an amazing tournament. It was we were down against Malaysia early. We came back and won in a shootout there. I get with 7,000 or 8,000 screaming Malaysian fans, this massive stadium, great energy. And we as players had actually paid $2,500 each because the organization had no cash to actually go to this. So it felt like we were just so invested in this moment and so invested in this tournament. And we're really just committed to do what it takes to sort of turn our program around in a sense, because it had been a bad year and a half, 2 years almost since we hadn't qualified. And I think, again, we had wins against France, we had wins against Poland, we had wins against Malaysia. And we were, a couple of goals away in a final against Korea from qualifying for the Champions Trophy, which is a tournament that we've never, ever qualified for before. I know the women played in it in the late 80s, early 90s, but the men have never played in a Champions Trophy. And so this was just a big, I think it was a big confidence builder for our group to say, yes, we can do this. We can beat, New Zealand finished below us. I can't remember all these good teams that finished below us, but, we made it all the way to the final. And here was this sort of cast of characters that had just come together off the back of a couple of years of disappointing results. So I think that was really the springboard for so much success that happened in 2015 and us qualifying for Rio. And then obviously that's led to, the success in 2018 and 19 and, subsequent Olympics and World Cups. But I guess that was such a turning point, and just knowing how invested we were as players from a financial perspective, in addition to sort of everything else that goes into competing for a country, I just think it was such a special moment.
Yeah. You've dealt with, injury. Obviously you mentioned your pinky and early in your career, but then you also mentioned that you tore your Achilles right near the end. And you and I have talked, at fairly length about that injury, but maybe you could just talk a little bit more about the decision to recommit to, all the rehab and get back on the field in time for the Tokyo Games, which wound up being, your final tournament for Team Canada. Just that decision, because given, with COVID and an injury, it wouldn't have been outside the realms of possibility for you to retire on that. And yeah. I'm just curious at what was going through your mind and when you made the decision, and so how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously proud. I mean, thankful to the likes of, Sean Campbell in particular, and Dr. Dory Bowyer, who I think in his words, he's operated on more Canadian Olympians than anyone in this country. Again, the medical staff, Doc Prasad. I mean, Doc is as a legend in every sense of the word, and just been such a huge part of our team for so many years. So, I'll call out those three in particular in terms of, helping me, from a medical perspective. I mean, I can only do so much. I can only do the band exercises, but I mean, in reality, I wanted to get back for many reasons. I wanted to get back to play hockey. I wanted to get back just for quality of life, so I can go for a run and not think about it, and get on a bike and not think about it. So, I didn't really know how I was going to respond. I knew I was in my, early to mid 30s and recovering from, one of the more significant injuries you can have as an athlete. So I really had no idea. I was just doing what I could. And, it sounds simple, but it's, one step in front of the other. But obviously I wanted to get back to my teammates. I wanted, I was so thankful that they got the job done against Ireland when I was on crutches there to give me that second chance to play. And again, that's why I love team sports so much, is that the boys can come through when you need them to come through the most. And then obviously from a personal perspective, my cousin Tom had sort of cracked the GB team, the English squad, sort of in the in the 2 years there that I was off, and we had not played them in a long time. And I knew we had a date with them in July at the Olympics. And I was sort of desperate to have that opportunity to play against my cousin for the first time. And again, have my family there with split t-shirts and split jerseys to watch. So, I'm just happy there was a happy ending, and that I was, well, not a happy ending in that we lost to them, but I was happy that I managed to play against Tom at the Olympics and compete without getting injured again.
Yeah. I want to ask you about your decision to retire. A massively long and successful career, over 16 years since you debuted for the national team. Probably tons of contributing factors, but how do you ultimately land on this decision and commit to it?
Good question. I just felt done. I don't know. I don't really know. It's not the most eloquent answer in the world, but I just, walking off that field or finishing that final whistle going against South Africa, I knew I didn't have anything left to give. Like it had taken a lot out of me to do what I needed to do to get not only healthy, but also fit again after that Achilles tendon tear, and the work that we put in as a group, in the heat of Vancouver, during the heat dome and things like that. And it just took a lot out of me. And I obviously still love it. I still love being around the guys. I'm going to be the biggest cheerleader for the group going forward. But I have other priorities in my life. I moved across the country, inserting myself more in the corporate world. And again, it's just, as you get older, you have different priorities in life, and you just don't have that same fire to do the things that you need to do to stay at the highest level. And our sport's only getting faster. It's only getting more technical. Like you really do need to push yourself constantly to stay at that highest level. And I'd done it for so long and was so proud of all the things that we had done. But I just felt done. So that's all I got.
Yeah. I mean, fair enough. You talk about the game getting faster and faster, more technical. For the next generation of Team Canada, the team that you're going to be cheering on, forever. You've played with some of these guys that are now going to be asserting themselves as main players on this team. What are you hoping for from the Red Caribou moving forward, and the team that you're going to be cheering on?
Yeah, I just hope the identity lives on. We have such a proud history, and again, there's sort of a duty and a service. I live in fear that if our results slip too much, that the likes of Rob Short, the likes of, Peter Milkovich, the likes of Paul Wetlaufer, the likes of Bubbly Chohan, they're going to call me up and ask me what's going on and why we're not winning games. And so I hope there's that sort of healthy fear of living, ensuring that sort of that pride of our group and the lineage of success that we have had and punching above our weight and, continues. So it just, hopefully they think about me now as someone that's going to be phoning them if the results slip. So no pressure, guys, but we did our job for a number of years. It's time to do your job. So
yeah, there's that fine line between pressure and support, and you always want to be you're walking right?
But that's the good thing, Kev, is there is such support. The likes of Ian Bird he's really coalesced so many of the alumni into getting giving back and really getting behind our group. And I know I'll be someone that's at the front of the line and supporting. And again, it's been a positive attribute. I don't mean it in a negative sense, but there is sort of that duty to kind of continue the lineage of success.
Amazing. For you, I guess, lastly, what's next, right? If you're not going to be on the field, what's next for you personally, professionally? Are you going to be involved in hockey at all, or is this a clean break? What's next for you, Mark?
Well, I haven't picked up a field hockey stick to play since the games. I've been out coaching a little bit. I'm fortunate that the community I've moved to here in Ottawa, there is a growing field hockey community here in Chelsea. And again, I came here for a job, for a girlfriend, for quality of life, for a house. I came here for many reasons. I'm picking up my cross country skis for the first time tomorrow, so I'm excited to try all the things that I didn't have time for during my field hockey playing days. So, going to be getting a mountain bike and again, getting downhill skis out a little bit more than I used to, and cross country skis. So I'm just excited to get into the outdoors a little bit more than I did before, and then insert myself in work. So I'm business development at the COC. I've been there for almost 2 years. And again, they've been very, very, I'm very thankful that they have been so supportive of me and allowing me to balance sort of work and training. But I knew that, like I said, it is the commitment necessary to stay at your peak now. And modern field hockey is getting more and more. And for me, it was just becoming harder to balance. And I'm just excited to sort of, focus a little bit more on my career and my relationship, and staying connected to my family, and yeah, just all the other things in life that are important.
Amazing. Well, Mark, thanks for chatting today. We'll call it there. Congrats on an incredible career. And yeah, you've left some big shoes, but I hope that the guys are ready to fill them.
No, they'll be plenty ready to film. There's lots of guys waiting. They weren't that big by the end. Don't worry.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Kev.